There are unseen blessings moving on your children's behalf, not because of their deeds, not because of their perfection, but because of your faithfulness in the quiet hours when no one saw you cry out to God. While the world mocked your prayers and your patience, heaven recorded every act of obedience. You stayed faithful when you could have rebelled. You forgave when you had the right to be bitter, and you believed, even when you had every reason to give up. The world called it weakness, but God saw it as worship. And now, He is doing something generational because of it. You didn't just walk the narrow path for yourself. You carved out a spiritual inheritance through tears and trials. Your footsteps of righteousness are paving the way for your children to walk in divine elevation. Scripture says in Deuteronomy 7:9, "Know therefore that the Lord your God is God. He is the faithful God, keeping His covenant of love to 1,000 generations of those who love Him and keep His commandments." That includes you. That includes your children. We often believe the fight is only ours, but God thinks in generations. When He sees your sacrifice, He doesn't limit the reward to your life. He extends it. He stretches the fruit of your obedience across the lives of your children and even your children's children. When the world sees your children rising and cannot understand why, know this: they are being raised not just by skill, not by chance, but by covenant. Some blessings do not arrive because of hard work alone, but because someone before chose to walk righteously with God. Like Noah, who found grace in the eyes of the Lord, Genesis 6:8, and through his obedience saved his entire household, your devotion has created a covering. You stood when others fell. You kept believing when the storms howled. That spiritual legacy cannot be erased, and heaven does not forget it. So today, I want to remind you that your children's rise is not a coincidence. Their favor is not random. It is God's response to your faith. Every time you knelt before God and asked Him to protect them, He was listening. Every time you stood at a spiritual crossroads and chose righteousness, you were building them a higher platform to stand on. God is the author of legacy. He writes stories in bloodlines, and He honors generational faith. Psalm 112, 1-2 says, "Blessed is the man who fears the Lord, who delights greatly in His commandments. His children will be mighty in the land. The generation of the upright will be blessed." So don't believe the lie that your efforts were in vain. Don't believe the silence of the present means the promises have been forgotten. Because you stayed faithful, your children are being lifted higher by the hand of God, not just for success in this world, but for purpose in His kingdom. And what's coming to them will not make sense to those who counted you out. Let us now explore how God honors your obedience by lifting your children, how your private faith is opening public favor over their lives. There is a sacred mystery in how God works through the lives of the faithful. When you decided to stay obedient to His voice, even in the seasons when your world was falling apart, you were not just holding things together for yourself. You were planting seeds. Not seeds that bloom overnight, but deep, divine seeds that God watches over in silence. And those seeds, though invisible in the moment, are the very reason your children are rising today. Faith is not just a personal virtue, it's a generational force. When God called Abraham, He didn't just promise him blessings for his own lifetime. He said, "I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky." Genesis 22:17. Why? Because Abraham chose to believe and obey. It was one man's faith that laid the foundation for a lineage of promise. And in the same way, your loyalty to God has placed a spiritual inheritance into your bloodline. Many people try to build their children's future through money, education, or influence. And while those things may offer earthly advantages, they do not carry eternal favor. Only the favor of God can create an elevation that cannot be explained by logic. You may have felt unseen. Your obedience may have been mocked or ignored, but heaven was taking note. You were laying down spiritual roots that the enemy could not touch. And those roots are now carrying the weight of your children's destiny. Your faith was tested when you could have walked away from God, but you didn't. You kept praying when others told you it was useless. You kept worshiping when you felt broken. That kind of faith is not ordinary. It's sacrificial, and sacrificial faith is the soil in which divine elevation grows. Even when your children didn't understand the battles you fought, they were covered in the spiritual residue of your trust in God. Every prayer you prayed around them, every fast you did in secret, every time you rebuked evil in your home, it shaped their future, whether they knew it or not. Proverbs 27 says, "The righteous who walks in his integrity, blessed are his children after him." That means your decisions, made in the quiet integrity of your walk with God, are blessing your children in ways they cannot comprehend. They are walking into rooms you never entered. They are receiving favor you never received. And it's not because they are perfect. It's because you stayed faithful. Just as a farmer does not plant a seed today and expect a tree tomorrow, your faith required patience. You had to wait, weep, and wonder if the sacrifice was worth it. And now, God is showing you, it was. Your children's strength, their wisdom, their peace, it's not just the result of good parenting. It's spiritual, it's prophetic, it's divine. They are being elevated not only for their sake, but to fulfill the promise God made to you in secret moments of surrender. So every time you see your child succeed, remember that success was born in a war you already fought. Your praise in the pain, your trust in the silence, your faith in the fire, those were the seeds, and now God is letting the harvest rise in the lives of your children. God is not bound by time the way we are. When He makes a promise, He doesn't just seal it for one person, He often seals it for generations. The Bible is filled with examples of individuals who walked with God and because of their relationship with Him, saw their children, grandchildren, and descendants receive blessings long after they were gone. This is the mystery of generational covenant. What you build in obedience doesn't end with you, it becomes the foundation for those who come after you. Exodus 26 declares, "But showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments." This is not just poetic language, it is a spiritual principle. God honors covenant beyond a single life. Your consistent love for God, your faithfulness in trials, your obedience in adversity, these did not simply store up favor for you. For you signed a covenant over your household when you chose to stay in God's will. When you could have chosen resentment, compromise, or bitterness, you wrote a spiritual legacy. And God, being the covenant-keeping Father He is, made sure that legacy didn't die with you. You may feel like your sacrifices were hidden, but in heaven they were seen as contracts, holy agreements that your bloodline will carry forward. And your children, though they may not even fully understand it yet, are stepping into the benefits of that covenant. Look at King David. Despite his mistakes, he was a man after God's own heart. And because of David's covenant with God, even when his son Solomon failed morally, God still remembered David and preserved the kingdom for Solomon's sake. 1 Kings 11:12. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will not tear it out of the hand of your son, yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him. This means Solomon was partially protected, not because of what he did, but because of who his father was before God. Now, think about your life. Every time you said no to sin, yes to truth, and yes to God, you made the same kind of covenant. That's why your children are receiving breakthroughs you never had. It's why doors are opening for them that never opened for you. The spiritual ground you cultivated is now bearing fruit through them. God's covenant is not like a business contract that expires with time. It is eternal. His eyes are not just on you, but on your children and their children. If he sees a faithful servant, he will often pour favor down the family line as a reward for devotion. Psalm 103:17 echoes this. But from everlasting to everlasting, the Lord's love is with those who fear him, and his righteousness with their children's children. You may not have built wealth to pass on. You may not have had worldly success, but you passed something far more powerful, a relationship with God, a history of prayer, and a name written in heaven. These are the true inheritances that last. Your obedience became the anchor of your household. It's not perfection that God rewards, it's covenant. And you, by walking faithfully, have aligned your family with divine favor that no man, no enemy, no curse can undo. There are moments in life when a child walks through dangers they never even realize existed, because a praying parent went before them. The spiritual realm is filled with battles most people never see, yet prayer stands as the invisible shield that blocks arrows the enemy meant to pierce the soul. Your prayers, whispered in faith, cried in agony, declared in boldness, they did not vanish into thin air. They were planted into the heart of heaven, and they are still protecting the path of your children today. In James 5:16, the Bible says, the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. That means your prayers carry weight. They don't disappear when the moment passes. They echo, they surround, they intervene. You may not always see the results instantly, but your prayers are moving spiritual walls and shifting destinies even when your words have grown silent. Your children are alive, covered and guided because you knelt when others stood and you wept when others walked away. Prayer is the language of intercession, and when you interceded for your children, you gave God legal access to step into their stories. You invited divine protection over their minds, their health, their relationships, and their futures. You may not have known what they would face, but God did, and your prayers became the preemptive strike against darkness that tried to mark them. That's why, even when your child strayed or made mistakes, something kept pulling them back. Your prayers were still active, still alive, still working. Remember Job? Though he was the most upright man of his time, he offered sacrifices and prayers daily, not for himself, but for his children. Job 1:5 tells us, he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my children have sinned. This was not a routine, it was spiritual warfare. Job understood that a parent's role didn't end with provision. It extended into intercession, and you, just like Job, have stood in the gap, pleading heaven's mercy and power over your sons and daughters. There are places your children walk now where your voice has never gone, but your prayers already have. You asked God to place the right people around them, and somehow they avoided the wrong crowd. You prayed for their wisdom, and they made decisions that surprised even you. You asked God to break generational cycles, and your children are living with freedom you never knew. None of this is random. It is the fruit of a life spent in spiritual surrender. Many underestimate the longevity of a parent's prayer. It does not expire. It does not weaken with time. In fact, the more time passes, the more God unfolds its power in ways you never imagined. Some of your prayers have not even been answered yet, because God is still aligning them with the perfect moment in your child's journey, and when that moment comes, it will not feel like coincidence. It will feel like a miracle, because that's exactly what it is. Every tear you shed while praying, every name you whispered, every scripture you declared, it all matters. Heaven heard you, and even when you feel like your child is wandering or lost, know this: your prayer has already gone ahead of them like a lamp before their feet. And wherever they turn, your voice is still echoing in God's throne room, and the angels are still on assignment. There is a spiritual truth often hidden in the pain of battle. Sometimes the enemies that came against you were never meant to destroy you, but to be the last line of warfare your children would never have to face. God allowed you to fight giants so your children could walk on ground already conquered. You didn't just survive the attacks. You sealed off paths of destruction that once haunted your family line. When you broke the chains of addiction, abuse, poverty, or fear, you did it not just for you. You did it so your children wouldn't have to wake up and fight those same devils. Your bloodline had been battling the same darkness for generations until God chose you to be the one who would say, "It ends here." That obedience cost you pain, isolation, and deep inner war, but now God is declaring, because of what you endured, your children will not have to. The Lord said to Moses in Exodus 14:13, "Do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again." That wasn't just about Moses. It was about the next generation walking through the Red Sea on dry ground. You faced Egyptians in your life, people who tried to break you, circumstances that crushed your spirit, spiritual warfare that nearly drowned your hope. But now God is saying that your children will walk through the very waters that nearly swallowed you, and they'll walk through safely. Some battles are not repeated because someone was brave enough to win them once. That someone was you. You stood when the family gave up. You prayed when the rest laughed. You didn't retaliate when they cursed you. You stayed upright when it would have been easier to collapse. And now, God is lifting your children above the level of warfare you endured. Sometimes you look at your child and wonder why life is unfolding easier for them than it did for you. It's not because life got easier. It's because you did the hard work of breaking chains they never had to carry. You silenced the lies. You exposed the patterns. You rebuked the spirits. You sowed in agony, and now your children are reaping in peace. That is not luck. That is legacy. Isaiah 54:17 promises, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord." Did you catch that? Heritage. That means the spiritual protection over your life extends to those who carry your name. The curses spoken over your head are now powerless over your children's future. The very forces that tried to ruin you will tremble at their arrival, because God has placed a divine mark on them, a mark they didn't earn, but one you carried through the fire. Your children may never understand the weight you carried. They may not know the nights you fought for their future in prayer, fasting, or silent tears. But God knows. And He is repaying your endurance by giving them what the enemy swore they'd never have: peace, elevation, and spiritual authority. There is something sacred about a parent's secret prayers. These are the whispered hopes, the quiet pleas made when no one else was watching. These prayers were not performances. They were heart cries, birthed in nights of exhaustion, whispered through trembling lips, soaked in tears, and spoken in faith when nothing in reality looked like it would change. And yet, every word you uttered in secret has been preserved before the throne of heaven. Now, God is fulfilling those very requests through the rising of your children. Matthew 6:6 says, "But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." This reward is not always wealth, recognition, or comfort, it is often generational fruit. What you did in secret, what you asked for when no one believed in your vision, God saw. And because He is a covenant-keeping Father, He is now causing those prayers to manifest, not through your own hands, but through your children's lives. Many people chase their dreams and seek to accomplish everything in their own lifetime. But those who walk closely with God understand some prayers are meant to be fulfilled through legacy. Abraham was promised descendants as numerous as the stars, but he never lived to see the full fulfillment. Still, God honored His word. In the same way, you may have prayed for your children to break cycles, to reach heights you couldn't, to live in wholeness, peace, and power. And now, slowly but surely, those very prayers are coming to life through them. There were seasons when you couldn't give your children everything they needed. Maybe you didn't have the finances. Maybe you didn't have the emotional support. Maybe the pain of your own upbringing haunted you. But you had prayer, and through prayer you placed your children into God's hands. You asked Him to make up for what you lacked. You asked Him to protect them from your own wounds, to lead them where you couldn't, to heal what life had broken. That kind of prayer does not evaporate. It builds a divine blueprint. And God, who works beyond time and space, is now following that blueprint. Your child may be gifted in ways you never imagined. They may carry a peace you never knew. They may be walking through open doors you only dreamed about. Why? Because you trusted God with their future. And now He is showing you that He took your trust seriously. Psalm 37, 4-5 says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in Him, and He will act." Some of the deepest desires of your heart were not even for yourself. They were for your children. And because you committed them to God, not just in words, but in years of surrender and service, He is now acting. There will be moments in your life where you'll watch your child thrive, and something inside you will feel divine recognition. That moment will feel familiar because you've already lived it in prayer. You saw it by faith before you ever saw it by sight. And that is the essence of walking with God, planting what cannot be seen and reaping what only heaven can grow. Your children are not rising randomly. They are stepping into prayers that were planted in tears. And every time they rise, God is reminding you, nothing prayed in faith is ever wasted. There is a wisdom that cannot be taught by books, mentors, or life experience alone. A wisdom that is inherited through sacrifice. When you walk faithfully with God through storms, struggles, and spiritual warfare, you acquire something sacred, a legacy of discernment. And whether your children realize it or not, they are now benefactors of that wisdom. They are being raised by the echoes of every lesson you learned through pain and surrender. You had to learn many things the hard way. You faced betrayal, disappointment, and loss. Yet you did not allow those wounds to define your spirit. You returned to God again and again, asking for clarity, asking for guidance, asking for peace. And in return, He gave you wisdom. That wisdom didn't just stay in you. It spilled into your home, into your parenting, into the very atmosphere your children were raised in. Proverbs 4:7 tells us, "Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding." You got wisdom through years of struggle. You understood who to trust and who to walk away from. You learned how to wait on God when others rushed ahead. You discovered how to discern truth in a world of noise. And while your children may not know every detail of what you endured, they are living in the overflow of the discernment you earned. Your sacrifice wasn't just about holding things together financially or emotionally. It was spiritual. You sacrificed your pride to forgive. You sacrificed your time to be present. You sacrificed your desires to obey God. These decisions taught your children not just what to do, but how to think, how to feel, how to pray. And because of that, their inner compass is stronger. They know how to navigate life not just with ambition, but with conviction. Consider how Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, inherited not only a throne but a deep reverence for God because of his father David. Despite David's failures, he was a man after God's heart. And Solomon's wisdom began with that foundation. In 1 Kings 3:6-9, when God offered Solomon anything, he asked for wisdom, not riches, not fame, because he was raised in the presence of a father who valued the presence of God. In the same way, your children may never ask for worldly things first, because they were raised watching you value spiritual things most. Wisdom isn't always visible in youth. Sometimes it reveals itself when a child faces their own trials, and in those moments, something will rise in them, a voice, a stillness, a strength they didn't know they had. That voice will be your legacy. That strength will be your sacrifice, living on. It's not that they avoided all struggle. It's that they were prepared with the kind of guidance that only comes from someone who lived through fire and still chose to worship. You built that in them, not through preaching, but through living. And now, when the world throws confusion and chaos at your children, they'll walk through it with clarity. Because while others taught them facts, you gave them faith. While others told them how to succeed, you showed them how to stand. And while others handed them tools, you passed down truth. Your children carry your wisdom like armor. And even if they don't say it out loud, heaven knows they are wiser because you were willing to sacrifice. Legacy is not measured by what you leave in the bank, but by what you leave in the soul. There are treasures that can't be counted in coins or properties. They're hidden in the values, convictions, and spiritual DNA that are passed from one generation to another. And the most powerful legacy a parent can ever leave behind is the legacy of unwavering faith, because that faith, though unseen, becomes the pen God uses to write the story of your children's destiny. You may have spent years thinking you were just surviving, but God saw something greater. You were building a blueprint. Each choice to believe Him when you didn't see results was not just for you, it was writing chapters your children would one day live. Every time you said, "God, I trust you," even through tears, you were placing bricks in the foundation of their future. You were modeling what it means to walk by faith and not by sight, and that legacy is now shaping who your children are becoming. Timothy 1:5 reminds us, "I am reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded now lives in you also." Paul saw the generational thread of faith. It moved through bloodlines like a spiritual inheritance, stronger than wealth, more enduring than success. The same applies to you. Your faith is being transferred. It is writing their destiny line by line, shaping their purpose, their calling, and their eternal perspective. Your children may not always quote your prayers. They may not always repeat your words, but they carry your spirit. The way they stand in adversity, the way they forgive, the way they pray when things go wrong, those are fingerprints of your faith. What you planted in them through years of consistency and spiritual sacrifice is not forgotten. Heaven is using it as material to mold their identity. This is why your story matters. The times you overcame pain, the moments you stood when you could have crumbled, the nights you worshipped in sorrow. Those are the things heaven remembers. And now, God is turning those sacred moments into milestones in your children's journey. What you overcame is becoming the foundation for their calling. The battles you won are becoming their confidence. and the faith you carried is becoming their direction. In today's world, people strive to control their children's future with strategies, schools, and savings. But the true power lies in surrender. You surrendered your children to God. You didn't just raise them, you offered them. You placed their lives into the hands of the one who sees the end from the beginning, and he took your offering seriously. Now, their destiny is not unfolding by accident. It is being crafted by the Master's hand, shaped by the blueprint you helped lay. That is the reward of faithful parenting. Not perfection, not ease, but purpose. Divine purpose that will outlive you and ripple into generations to come. You may not have had everything the world calls success. You may not have been celebrated, recognized, or even thanked, but heaven saw. And because you stayed faithful, because you kept your heart aligned with God when life tried to break you, He is now lifting your children higher. They are walking in favor, not because of privilege, but because of promise. They are covered not just because of protection, but because of prayer. They are wise not just because of education, but because of example. Their destiny is unfolding in beauty because your obedience laid the path. And while others chase legacies carved in stone, yours is written in spirit, a legacy that cannot be erased. Your reward is not just in heaven, it is in the rising of your children. And God, who never forgets faithfulness, is honoring you by raising them higher than you ever imagined. Because you stayed faithful, God is writing a story through your children that will glorify His name for generations.